Last time I was here, I talked about rainbow poop. I'm going to show you a little bit of stuff that I've been doing since then. All right, let's see how this goes. So a little bit about me. This is my new me slide because you know how you have to change every once in a while. I like to change my hair. I figured I'll change my me slide. A little bit about me. I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm kind of a dinosaur, but I try not to be. That's what the red hair is all about. And I'm really deeply invested in trying to help women come to cybersecurity. I've been doing this thing called Hacker Girl. I got a couple of little girls myself, 3 and 8 now. Last time I talked to her, I think my little girl was 18 months old. And I am a faculty member at IONS. I work at Intuit. I run the red team there. And they said I started the red team because I have red hair. I don't know if that's true. All right. So, you know, everything good starts with either fire or poop when it comes to DevOps. So we'll just start out with like grounding ourselves. This was the thing that I actually talked about last time I was here. We're not going to talk about this time. I'm just going to let you know it's not a poop talk. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? I just have to do a shout out to some colleagues of mine in the DevOps community who wrote a love letter to auditors. And having been a former auditor, I actually took this and really loved it. I felt like it was actually written to me. And since James Wickett was one of the authors, I felt like, hey, I knew you loved security, folk. It just took a while for you to catch on. And he's in the audience today. Also, this talk is dedicated to Rob Stroud. For those of you who don't know, he passed away recently. He's been a big advocate in the DevOps space, and so I wanted to do something a little bit more meaningful, and that's why I brought this Dear Auditor slide. And so today what I'm going to talk about is speed with confidence. And you know, I've been inspired by the fact that everybody's really talking about how could we go faster. DevOps is going to help us to do, you know, 25, 30, 3,000 changes a day as a company, whatever that might mean. And essentially, I've always been thinking about the fact that speed is a great thing to have, but what about security folk? And this really spoke to me from an auditor perspective. You know, this letter was about the DevOps community leaving everybody behind and essentially leaning into speed and watching more and more workloads basically come out with mistakes. And I've gone through a huge transformation myself. I will tell you, one of the biggest epiphanies I've had is working in this capability in this movement for the last 6.5 years and really watching as there's been evolution. I was the first DevSecOps engineer. I was either crazy, well, I am actually a little crazy, and now there's definitely several thousand people who are starting to really bring this capability to their organizations, so I'm really proud of that. So software begins with a spark of imagination, things that we want to build. We might want to solve somebody's customer problem. At my organization, the founder of Intuit actually solved his wife's accounting problems by having a spark of imagination at the kitchen table. I thought that was really cool. And he's like, I'm going to solve your problems through software. And back then, software was kind of prehistoric, back when we all did Pascal code. And yes, there wasn't cross-site scripting back then, but Pascal had its own problems. And so that should tell you if Pascal is like what I remember. Yeah, I'm definitely old, and the red hair doesn't do enough to get rid of the gray. And if you think about it, the spark of imagination, this is what we're all here for, right? We love software, we're super excited. Now our toasters can come online in the morning, we can wake up to coffee that's made. And anybody pay any ransomware yet for their coffee in the morning? I'm just wondering. I know it's going to happen. I'm pretty sure there will be a news article in the next few years about the fact that somebody paid ransomware for their coffee in the morning. But I wanted to start off saying, you know, I really am deeply interested and empathetic towards building software because my organization, my red team, builds software every day. And they've found the same thing that I've found. It's really hard. And so having empathy for this spark of imagination is so crucial. So, you know, let's talk for a moment about what it's really like to do security in a DevOps world, in a cloud world, in a speedy, developer world where somebody might be overconfident that they've got it all right. There's no security bugs. We're under the radar. We don't have to worry about things. I've got deadlines. And then the security person, you don't know what you're doing, right? No, we don't know. I'm a security person. I've never said that before. Okay, yeah, maybe I have, right? And so it's like, if you think about this for a moment, this is the paradigm that we've been seeing for years, right? These are the things that we actually see in terms of dynamic between the people out there. And I can tell you that software doesn't get created by computers, it gets created by people. It gets created by wonderful minds, human beings. And by the way, I'm definitely one of those people who didn't realize there were humans in the world until maybe like 6 years ago when I went to a huggy-feely company that I absolutely adore. And it's the longest job I've ever had. That should tell you something. I'm definitely a reformed, computer maniac. And I'm definitely on the side of, I really want software to be safe, and I always believe that you could build something perfect. And it started this whole conundrum, right? So if that's the case, and basically you've got a developer who's saying, my app is absolutely safe, I assure you, nothing's gonna get it, right? Never heard that before, right? Anybody? Oh yeah, okay. All right, so if your app is completely safe, then I don't really have a job. Josh Corman told me maybe, 2013 that I should look for other work. I should start building software because security was going away. Security was gonna get actually done by developers. And all that AppSec training that seems to fail, that we've all been trying to push, all those cross-site scripting things and command injection, they got it. So you heard that, right? Y'all looking for other stuff to do. Done? Okay. Well, turns out that I started a red team and I said, all right, well, if your app is safe, then I guess my job is to go out and figure out whether or not bad guys feel the same way. So you can imagine my first red team exercise. I found out some things. Not everything was that safe. And so now it was like, am I gonna go back and tell that guy he's a liar? It's probably not a good thing. We actually have a notion of good intent. And I don't know if you guys really think about this a lot, but good intent is interesting. And when somebody thinks that something's safe, they do have good intent. They just don't know, and they don't want to know. And that's a really interesting piece of advice for most people. I went through this exercise, and by the way, during this period of time where everybody was saying their app was safe, they were like, hey, security people, could you get a clue? Could you just clean sheet yourself, start over, realize that there's not that many bad guys in the world? And I'm like, well, hey, that's a great discussion we should probably have. So let's move on for a moment. And guess what? When you actually start arguing, it's get off my lawn. Well, that's fine if there's a pathway, right? And then get off my lawn gets a little worse. Get off my lawn. And the pathway gets broken up. You start having to hop over things. And by the way, as a security person, we get really good at this. We're like, all right, fine. I will find a way to get through the lawn. It's not going to be a problem. By the way, these are really far apart, and I'm really short, and I don't hop, so this is really complicated. You got to build all these things to get across. And then, they're like, oh, well, you made it across? Great. So get off my lawn. And you're like, oh, that's really going to be more complicated. Do I have a pogo stick or something? I don't know. And the reason why I put this up is because boundaries get created in how we think about our interactions. And if you're noticing, I'm really focusing on the human today. It's because my epiphany was that my job is to figure out how to build confidence in other folks. If I had no confidence and they had too much confidence, what was the right thing to do? And having squabbles never really ends well. In fact, it ends in a prove it, which starts a red team that ends up being 45 people. And then you realize, am I really fighting against all the people who actually build and make revenue for the organization that solves problems for the lady who's sitting at the kitchen table? And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I actually am trying to do that. And prove it turns into how well can I prove it, and how good are we, and can we exploit software, can we write exploits, can we do CVEs? And by the way, the answer to all those things is eventually yes. You can get people to get the OSCP, you can build up all the skills necessary to be able to run at speed and scale, and to deal with 4,500 developers that are building software every day. That is the answer. You absolutely can. But Then all of a sudden you start to see more of this happen. No one knows these off the top of their head, right? You guys have them memorized? There's more and more every day. I try to memorize them. They're kind of, things that I read before I go to bed at night. Fabulous work. And most of them basically say, if you do these things, nothing will get you. Right? Right? Now, there will never be a breach in your environment if you fulfill all these things. Great. Let's just do all of them. We'll automate it. Anybody heard that? They're just going to automate away all the compliance and security stuff? Yeah, again, we're out of jobs. If you're a security person, you're looking for other work. I'm just trying to get you there. And this doesn't happen. And what this is basically, apparently, there was a study done for all of the regulations on how many companies were certified PCI compliant and who accomplished NIST and had SSPs. And breaches don't happen on compliant stuff at all. Because, by the way, all the scanners and all the automation, they think of every single thing possible and write rules that are perfect, right? Oh wait, who's going to write this security software that's going to do all the security work for all of us? Yeah, right? Oh, all the developers that care about making revenue and solving customer problems? Yeah, this is what they want to do. They want to start to make it so that they can write software that actually will ultimately fail in its quest. So I guess the answer maybe not be the whole compliance automation thing. So if that's not the answer, and it's a zero-sum game, I'm fighting with them, they're fighting with me, who's fighting against the bad guys, right? The bad guys are winning, it's a total zero-sum game. Basically, nobody's moving anywhere. And ultimately, that gets to be a bad state. Remember, get off my lawn, right? And eventually, the lawns just get bigger. But what if we could actually make things simpler? What if there was a way to do confidence testing? What if the question that you ask your developers is, how many adversaries does your application have? Or what's your confidence level that you got all the cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in your application? And by the way, they might say it's 100%. And then your job is to prove it, right? And most of the time we're fighting to try and get some sort of security training into folks. But we don't ask the number one question, which is, if you're already skilled at this, why am I training you anymore? Do you really want this information from me? Because maybe you don't. Maybe you're good at it. Maybe your application is 100% safe. Reality is that it's probably not. But we're going to talk a little bit about confidence today, because I had a discussion with somebody recently, and I don't know if security folk or developers or folks that are engineers actually get trained about some of the leadership aspects of moving things forward. But one of the amazing things is that if you just leverage confidence as your guide, you can make things a lot simpler and you can get somewhere faster. And so we're going to talk about that. So I actually decided that after this epiphany that I could use confidence testing, that I could ask 10 CIOs 2 questions, only 2, because by the way, they won't answer more than 2. And the third one was never needed, because apparently the 2 questions were actually meaningful. So I asked the first question. The first question was, what would you choose? Would you choose to have your entire organization understand how to make security decisions? Or would you choose 3 really great security rock stars to be part of your organization that were going to cure everything, world peace included? And unanimously, they said, 100% chose A. I want to distribute security knowledge and decision making to people who are in line doing the work. I thought that was really interesting. So the second question, because that's the easy question, what do you want? All right, so how are you going to go about doing that? And I said, would you want to train your staff with 40 hours of security training per year, per person? And by the way, I started calculating the number, and I basically put lots of millions in front of that person, and they were like, that's sounding very not interesting. And then I calculated the next one, which was basically, what if 1% of your staff was dedicated to security curation? And they were like, that's actually sounding more meaningful. And the reason why is the next slide. So unanimously, they all chose 100%. that beast thing, which is even though they wanted everybody to make security decisions, they still wanted somebody who knew what they were doing to check. But the rationale behind it was what was more interesting. The rationale was context is moving in these organizations too fast for you to actually make security decision makers good at it. In other words, you're going to actually have to have your workload moving at the speed of light, and there's no one in this world that can actually take on 3,000 changes a day. One person, 3,000 changes, that's a lot to look at. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm not good at finding cross-site scripting vulnerabilities like every second of the day. It takes me a little bit of effort, and having been doing this for 30 years, I'm still not exactly all that great at it. And by the way, now I don't have to be, because nobody wants me to code anymore. They want me to manage and coach people, and that's great. So I've risen to my incompetence level, which is fabulous, right? Now, and I, by the way, I find out all the time, because I get told, hey, you could say that better, you could teach that better, you could train that better. And that's interesting to me, because when we actually go out and do things like AppSec training, does anybody give you an NPS score? You know what a Net Promoter Score is? Anybody get Net Promoter Scores? Anybody get like positive Net Promoter Scores on their AppSec? I love you guys. I need to talk to you afterwards. I need to find out what you're doing. And by the way, what they've also said is that training doesn't provide the skills necessary to be able to make meaningful things happen from a security perspective. And the last thing they said is perfection is the enemy of good. Businesses need to take risk. And I'm like, damn. My whole job is about you being perfect. My job is about making risk not happen. My job is about making risk go away. And you're telling me you have to take risk for the business to thrive and survive. Oh, that's not good. All right, so, well, let's talk about this then. How are we gonna do it? And we have this thing that we do with our tax division, and basically it's kind of the whole notion of do it for me, do it with me, and then get the heck out of my way, I'm doing it myself. And so, by the way, security is kind of starting to go down this road. You've got the notion of shared security responsibility. Anybody got cloud providers? How many folks are, yeah, you're all moving to the cloud, you just don't know it yet. It's gonna happen. Maybe we're a little slow down here, it's all right. By the way, I got pushed into doing cloudy stuff for most of my career, so I don't know anything better than the cloud. I started with utility computing, and it ended up with a whole bunch of people saying, give me more power to make decisions. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, are they ready to do it? And you know, you have to question deep inside yourself whether you have the confidence about people making it there. And eventually you'll get to the point where you realize, well, they gotta get there, which means I gotta give them room to fail, which means my job is actually to figure out how to have failure modes that actually don't cause the organization to fail. This is the beginning of how you have to think about your job, and it's basically a change and transformation that starts somewhere deep inside yourself. I also did some other research. I like to do a lot of little things. I don't like to do huge surveys and huge projects. I like to do little meaningful things. So I went to LinkedIn, and this is development, security, and operations, DevSecOps. And then there's DevOps, and then there's DevSecOps. And what's interesting is to find out how many people were in each one of these segments. And by the way, I don't actually think that this is perfect knowledge, so like, don't anybody like hold me to the fact that I think this is the universe of all technology people. This is actually the US version of LinkedIn. I think when you actually query LinkedIn, you have to go to every country to figure out how many people in the world there are. I will probably build that script at some point just to figure out whether or not it's fun. What I ultimately found out is that in the US, or maybe even people who have a US profile that are out of the country but realize that they want to work with US folks, there's about 4,599 people who have DevSecOps on their LinkedIn profile in some capacity. Whether it's they mention that they do it, they don't necessarily always have the title of it, they're not quite sure they understand exactly what it is, but they're kind of doing it. And when you start looking at DevOps, you got about, you know, we're like 1% the DevSecOps folks, or 1% of the 99% of the other ones, right? And DevOps is about 400,000 folks. And then you really look up there and you're like, wow, I aspire to be a developer apparently, because there's 7 million of those folks. So you're gonna find out where this is going. So I also took a look at the number of jobs that are available by segment, which was also kind of interesting. And the number of jobs by segment would tell you kind of where the industry is going. Did you know if you become a DevSecOps that you actually could do all these jobs? So that means that your universe of jobs just became pretty big. So that's really fun to me, is to find out that if I actually focus on the skills that allow me to take advantage of all of these, that I could be really able to do a lot of things in my career. But what's interesting was, oh, by the way, when you actually calculated the percentages, developers right now, there's about 3% job openings for the total population that was actually listed there of 7 million, right? There's about 4% for the folks in InfoSec. There's about 3% for the operations folks. There's 10% for DevOps. I thought that was really interesting. Guess what that means? There's a total hiring spree right now for DevOps. And by the way, DevSecOps, there's 30% for the population. 1,300 jobs, 4,500 people. That's a lot of opportunity, lots of movement. By the way, if you're trying to actually grow your career, go for a segment that's actually emerging, because there's lots of opportunity there. That's where you build your skills. So why is this important when we're talking about confidence? Well, it's important because when you start looking at this, there's 4,500 people that are confident enough to put DevSecOps on their LinkedIn. There are a lot of people that are confident about putting developer on their LinkedIn. There are folks that are doing information security, right? Everybody heard there's like 1 million jobs that are going unfilled. I could not find them, I tried. I don't think that everybody's publishing them on LinkedIn, so by the way, I know there's a population of data I'm missing right now, but I really do think that eventually I am gonna wanna find where all those 1 million jobs are. Because I think that it's really important as you're thinking about what you can do to help move software to the next level, to get inspired to work for an organization that is doing something meaningful so you can build your confidence over a period of time. And that is actually what these CIOs were saying, is that I want to retain my talent base long enough for them to truly be able to make great security decisions, for them to build awesome software, for them to innovate at speed and scale. And by the way, most people are actually leaving their jobs after 2 years, and that means that they will take the knowledge that they get at your organization to the next organization, and they may not actually get all the skills that they need because the lesson plan that you have may be longer than 2 years. And so they're constantly starting over and over and over. Isn't that kind of interesting? Lots of details, lots of interesting information. So I decided to graph some stuff. Speed versus perfection. Everybody in here perfection? No? Oh, okay, yeah, we can't be. I know, it's a silent interest of mine. And it has to be silent because my company told me to stop seeking it. So what I found out is that devs really like a lot of speed. See that hockey stick? Ever seen one of those before? I remember it back in like the 2000, 2001 time frame when the internet collapsed. And then ops, they're like, I'm a little bit more shy, I need to figure things out, but I still need to do speed because I gotta be able to support these guys that wanna publish their stuff like this. And so they kind of stay together, right? What's interesting is that when you start a new project, security starts off a little bit lower in terms of confidence, a little bit less speed, we're a little slower to the party. We come in and we ask a lot of questions and we kill the buzz of that little spark that gets created. And over time, you'll notice, and by the way, this has real data behind it. I've done a bunch of projects with people in my organization. I've got lots of Petri dishes. And what I found out is that the security person loses confidence pretty fast, and speed starts to diminish. And the ops and devs folks, they basically start to go towards making more speed happen. Ultimately, you see this little red line. The red line basically indicates that we need to make sure that we have risk, right? So if you think about it, if you're not perfect, you're taking on risk. And perfect is actually the eye of the beholder. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now, what's interesting is the dev folks are realizing to get to market on time, to get to the customer, things that they need to do to be able to make progress happen, well, they gotta take a lot of risk. And so they're really chasing that speed thing. If you don't have a P0 security vulnerability, go the heck away. And that's kind of interesting because prioritization becomes interesting. So what's more interesting is when you actually arrive at real confidence. Anybody want to achieve real confidence? Not the fake stuff that you actually have to say, yeah, that's great. But real confidence, the questions that it actually takes to take somebody from, hey, you're going really fast, and is that the right thing for the company? Or you're going really slow, and is that the right thing for the company? I get caught between these two levers all the time. I run a team that actually has to chase adversaries and write software to do that. And so I have to deliver. And at the same time, I need to make sure it's done safely. And so it's kind of this conundrum to go back and forth. So let's talk about that for a minute. So if everybody's kind of chasing it together, right? Everybody's together to begin with. We're all really happy at the inception of projects when they're really new, they're greenfield. We can't do anything truly wrong. They're small little bits, right? But all of a sudden, you start to do more and more, features get rich, you start to want to scale. Anybody get excited about scale in this room? Scaling apps, really? How many are security folks? I need to talk to you later, right? What's interesting about this is when it starts to scale, when you start to get feature rich, all of a sudden the curve for security bends, and now there's no longer that confidence that comes with the speed that was happening. And so why does that happen? What happens with the developers is they get this hockey stick effect. And all of a sudden, they're like, yeah, I'm with you, and now I gotta get something done. I did all the baseline stuff that you told me to do, and I think that's enough. I'm good. I don't even know what to do after that. You're not making any sense. You just said IAST, DAST, SAST. I don't even know what those things are. I don't know where to find them. I looked them up on the internet. I think I even misspelled them. And oh, by the way, you're kind of a drag when you're talking about that stuff. So as a dev, I just want to get my stuff done, and you'll find it, right? Okay, we're good. And then when you start to think about that security person again, and they hockey stick down, they're really driving for perfection. I want you to have no risk. I want you to have perfect software. I want to make sure that we're not going to get broken into. And I'm going to run every scanner, every tool, every POC, everything imaginable. I'll throw the kitchen sink at you because I want to make sure nobody's getting in, right? Nobody's getting in. So what's interesting is we're all chasing different things. Developers are chasing 99% of the use cases, right? Those 99% use cases. Developers actually decide that the 1% edge case is not meaningful. Did you know that most of the stuff that actually ends up being abuse cases is the 1%? And so the security person's actually chasing the 1% use case, and the developer's chasing the 99% use cases. And they really don't overlap a whole lot. They overlap very minutely in where we actually see edge cases for abuse cases and use cases align, which I actually consider still fraud. And for those of you who know what that is, ATOs and some of those things are hard to detect, but they're actually part of your application. So this was a meaningful experiment that turned into a real insight, which was, if we're chasing the abuse cases and they're chasing the use cases, how do we talk to each other? How do we get to the point where that's going to be meaningful? So we realized one thing, which is there's a sweet spot. If you are a security professional, you should be chasing 60 to 80% good. In other words, you can't get to perfect. 80 to 100%, when you get over that 80% marker, diminishing returns. You're actually now fighting with your development team because you're actually going to start slowing their cadence down. You're going to drag them to a halt. And by the way, that 80 to 100%, most of those are the low vulnerabilities you see in them. They're informational, low. They mean nothing. The developer questions your sanity because you're asking them to do things that don't seem to be that useful. Now, I'm not going to say all of the scanners get it right. Like some of the low vulnerabilities is actually where the red team hangs out because they're actually miscategorized, and that can be fun too. But this was a real interesting and meaningful insight. So the question is, would all of you be happy with 60 to 80%? Hands up. All right, I got some people in here who are kind of like, no, I don't know, that's kind of scary, right? Now, what if I asked you the next question, which is, what if there were no exploitable weaknesses? How many hands? No exploitable weaknesses. You could get your development team 100% of the time to get to that point. And guess what? That's meaningful. There were a lot more hands, by the way, the second time. which means that my job now is to chase exploitable weaknesses, to prove it, to break in, to do it in production, to make it so it goes away. And so we're going to talk about that for a moment. I like this because I thought it was really cool. I'm now basically some combination of a turtle and a rabbit, which kind of, I don't know what to call that, but it was really cool. Loved his artwork. And so if this is kind of like my new logo in life, I'm okay with it. I think I can do 60 to 80%, as long as there's zero critical exploitable weaknesses. Not bad. So how do you get there? I was dieting once upon a time, and I'm still kind of dieting, which means I'm just addicted to the nutritional facts. And so I decided, I must have been low on calories this day. I wrote this security facts label. And what you can see in here is that this is like, if I was reading something and wanted to pick out a really good product, I'd probably want to know like something about it. You know, how compliant is it today? You know, what's going on with it? But most importantly, I really do want to know, is this application attractive to adversaries? Like, are they going to spend any time on it? 97% adversary interest? Wouldn't that drive you crazy? All of a sudden, 60 to 80%? Right? If it had that much interest, would you want it to be perfect? Probably. And so now the question is, what does perfect really mean for an adversary? Adversaries are interesting. They want motives, means, and opportunities. I'm talking to you folks about this because, by the way, for AppSec, I'm going to show you some of my experimentation and research here real quick that leads to some of the information about why 60 to 80% is still meaningful. And motives, means, and opportunities. Do you know that the security industry focused mostly on opportunities? I thought that was really interesting insight too. No one really focuses on means, and they don't really focus on motives. If you're an AppSec person, how often do you get threat intel from your threat intel group? Almost zero, right? How many people actually get threat intel from their threat intel group? One guy, two, three, few of you folks, that's good, all right. Every single person in the room should get the threat intel from their threat intel group. I'm saying that on camera, go play this back for your teams. There's a reason. If you're not sharing that threat intel data between your security folk, you're missing out, because the means and the motives are actually really crucial to being able to stop exploitable weaknesses in time. So I did this research, OWASP versus the real world. I know I'm standing at an OWASP conference. I'm really, really sorry. I'm going to start with that. Yeah, thank you. You know, what's interesting is the OWASP Top 10, when we started categorizing this and put down some stuff for AI/ML, I also said that, so also feel free to boo me later. We were trying to figure out what's the pattern we should expect for this kind of stuff. And we said, all right, at the very bottom, which you can't read, it's the number of adversary IPs. And the very top is the perceived success by a bad guy. So what we were looking at was error codes that come back, and we were looking at kind of how much investment are these bad guys going to put into this, right? In other words, I'm looking at their means and their motives. I'm really thinking about what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And essentially, when we ran this experiment, we said, all right, let's put some real-world traffic through this. And all of a sudden, my AML model actually broke down. The thing that I expected didn't happen. Huh. All right, well, what did happen? These scanners started showing up. Did you know that the world loves to scan everything out there? It's amazing to me. And they use things like ZMap that does it in 45 minutes. You can find pretty much anything that's live on the internet in 45 minutes. I thought that was really cool. And this is a really interesting segment because these folks are actually selling to the folks that are going to come here soon, which is if you're looking for that threat intel stuff, you want to know like how many scanners are hitting you, what are they looking for? Because by the way, this is actually what's going to happen is they're going to sell this information to a bunch of other bad guys. And you're never going to see those folks, and that's important, and I will explain to you in a moment. All right, so researchers. How many folks have a public disclosure program? Bug bounties, invite researchers. Yeah, this is a really cool segment. They only focus on a few things. We did a lot of experiments. We compared notes with other folks. We went after looking for data to determine if we were just seeing a very rare segment of this population. Turns out that they're making most of their money on subdomain takeovers. They're selling CVEs instead of publishing public CVEs, so the scanners that we're all relying on are starting to break down because we're not seeing the CVE population we used to. Which means that if you are an AppSec professional, please find a CVE bug and disclose it as quickly as possible. We need to replenish. But what was more interesting was also that they're paying for noise. So when a bad guy, a real bad guy is going to do something, he lays down this blanket of noise that kind of looks like these three things, which is evasion. SQL injection, funny enough, they're doing things like WAF breakers. Anybody seen a WAF breaker yet? A WAF breaker is different IPs, different headers, a different calculation in every single packet that comes through. And what are they trying to get you to do? They're trying to get you to drop your WAF because it's not performing for your application. That was really interesting. So finally, the real bad guys. So here's where they cluster up. The real bad guys are dealing in command injection, feature abuse. They're going through all these things. Their perceived success is actually close to their real success. Super cool. Because by the way, when you actually get this model figured out, you can find them more often. You can do interesting things with them. You can do things like cause all of their threat intel to go away. You can actually do things like deception. I thought once upon a time that deception was like old school, old news. Turns out it's not even being used at the level it should be used. And if I can invite you to do one thing as an AppSec professional, start looking at deception. Super interesting. You can actually change how this comes out. And when you change this kind of model, you're winning. Your organization is winning, which means that 60 to 80%, you're now trying to figure out how to leverage data like this as an AppSec professional to help your developer to be able to do more meaningful stuff with their time. So if we tell everybody on the development side to do OWASP top 10, but we actually need them to do less guessing and do the real world top 10. By the way, there's a lot of overlap between these two, so I'm not saying don't do the OWASP top 10, but if you actually get them to enumerate the stuff in their applications, you get them to use their logs, you get them to be interested in the meaningful information about the 1%, they'll actually chase down all of these things, and when you give them a defect, they'll solve it pretty quickly because that's real stuff. That's where the real adversaries are. Remember I said adversary interest is interesting? Well, when it comes down to it, this is why people will actually get the understanding very quickly about what these things are. They see them in the logs. All of a sudden, they'll have magical understanding about SQL injection, cross-site scripting. Anybody excited about that? Because by the way, it's going to make your training objectives so much easier to train them in line. Do micro training, find ways to send defects and bugs in that'll allow people to learn on the job in real time. And by the way, you will get more than 8 hours every once a quarter. You'll get more than 40 hours a year. You'll in fact get somewhere in the neighborhood of 320 to 400 hours out of every single developer that you come in contact with, because that's how often they're going to encounter something that's actually meaningful from a security perspective. So what's that look like? You're an AppSec professional, right? You're a security professional, you're a developer, you're trying to get this information in. What's it look like? Bring everything you can, all your security testing data, all your log data, all of anything you can get your hands on, bug bounty data, anything that will create security telemetry, correlate it, pull it together, and by the way, publish it to a developer backlog. I like to get auditor love letters, but my way of returning the favor is I send little Valentines to my developer friends on a routine basis almost every day. And actually, they're quite interested in getting them and fixing them as quickly as possible. So it feels like a good, nice reciprocal way of operating. Other thing for you guys. What if we simplified all this stuff? What if we got down to something that was almost intuitive? What if we made the developer's life easy, that they only really had to remember 5 things to do 80% well? What if these 5 things allowed them to be able to pull in a lot of their attack surface, to be able to understand what's happening in their application, to control it, to be able to look for an adversary, look for the use case, the abuse case, and actually leverage things like deception controls, authentication, and other types of things that will actually make adversaries go away. What if you could drive them away? This is the kind of thing that will allow you to do it. A security hierarchy of needs, most people understand the Maslow hierarchy of needs. There was a lot of training that went into that when they were in school. And so trying to find ways to simplify, I would love to see all the simple methods that we can come up with as a community, because I think that the next generation of being able to do AppSec is getting our developers to understand how to do the abuse case in real time. So I think we can actually get here. I've seen it, I've experienced it. I've got lots of friends that are developers. I have really interesting, discussions. I've got a team of people who are highly engaged. And I think when it comes down to it, putting all the pieces back together is really, really meaningful. The relationships stop sounding like, get off my lawn, and they start sounding like, hey, I have cookies and cake, could you come over and have coffee with me? And by the way, I actually had to have mine tested for poison the first time they arrived, because I wasn't real sure. But after the first donut was eaten, no problem, person didn't die right away, so it was good. I did wait for about 24 hours before I accepted the next set of donuts. My team now sits around large conference tables. You've got a red team that actually is accessible. If you want to know some of the use cases out there that you should be looking for, I went to the DevOps Summit just recently. I was super excited because I'm a security professional that went to a developer conference. I went to Velocity. I've gone to different developer conferences, and by the way, they're talking about security. They want us there. If you're a developer that's here, thank you for coming, because it's so important for us to be able to cross-pollinate this understanding and truly get to the point where we're not just throwing stones at each other, that we're actually creating meaningful and valuable information that helps us against real adversaries. I think that the best thing about this community is that we can actually find, even with different things, I call mine DevSecOps, you might call yours AppSec. It doesn't really matter in the end what it's called. It actually matters that we're actually chasing away the bad guys, we're taking away their ROI, and we're making the applications that our kids are going to be able to leverage, and that we're able to do things like, find cures for bad diseases, be able to make our lives better through technology, that those things remain. And so if we want to find a way to really forge the gap, it's to care about that 99% set of use cases and find a way to make the 1% abuse case almost minimal, almost negligible when it comes to being a developer, so that it's easier for them. I like to believe that's possible. I know it's a lot of work, it's super complicated, but if I go and talk to my developer partners and I expect them to understand the security dictionary that we all carry with us, in our experience and our years. I mean, I can talk 3-letter acronyms with probably most of the crowd here, and we'll know what we're talking about. But go to a developer conference, say the words, and it's going to happen. What happened to me? What are you talking about, and what planet are you from? And by the way, when you drop all of that and you're just simply talking about bad guys, it becomes meaningful. Every single person might not be able to understand what an attacker is capable of, but they're absolutely aware of what it's like to be a victim. So my last few parting words here are, we need some help. We're writing a book right now. We're doing some stuff for DevSecOps. You've got use cases, you've got abuse cases, you've got knowledge to share. Developers need a meaningful treatise that can be something that they leverage, and this is something that we're really dedicated to doing DevSecOps transformations. We believe that the AppSec community is part of this endeavor. The applications that we all care about are actually going into these things. The DevOps handbook has sold hundreds of thousands of copies, and that means that there are people that are reading these things and actually processing to get to knowledge. So if you get a chance, send us an email at book@devsecops.org. We really do care. We're trying to process this information, and you'll see that it's going to mean something in the end. So I really thank you for coming today. This is one of the best conferences I've ever been to. You guys are an awesome audience. And I look forward to learning from everybody today as well. Thank you.